What you are about to hear is a work of fiction. The people, places, and events depicted in this story are products of the author's imagination or used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual individuals, living or deceased, or to real situations is purely coincidental. These stories may explore themes of crime, injustice, and human suffering. While fictional, they reflect real emotions and difficult truths that some may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised.
You're fired, Michael. And if you don't repay every cent, I'll press charges. The words hung in the air like thunder, but this wasn't the beginning of our story. This was the moment when 62-year-old Linda Hargrove finally found the courage to confront the person who had been stealing from her for over a year, the person she trusted most in the world, her own son. Please, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to know just how far our stories reach. But let's start from the beginning, in the quiet suburb of Willow Creek, where maple trees lined the streets like silent guardians, and where Linda Hargrove had built something remarkable from nothing at all. Linda was a woman whose life read like a testament to quiet resilience. At 62, she moved with purposeful grace, her silver hair always neatly pinned back, her reading glasses perched on the bridge of her nose as she reviewed the endless stream of numbers that had become her world. Her hands, though marked by arthritis, remained steady as she worked through ledgers and balance sheets with the precision of a master craftsman. Hargrove Accounting occupied a cozy office downtown, but it had humble beginnings. 30 years ago, after her husband Tom's sudden death in a car accident left her a widow with 2 young children, Linda had started the firm in her garage. With nothing but an accounting degree, fierce determination, and a kitchen table that doubled as her first desk, she had built the business client by client, year by year. What began as a lifeline had grown into a thriving firm employing a dozen people, handling the books for local businesses throughout the county. The scent of fresh coffee always filled Linda's office in the early morning hours. She began each day at dawn, reviewing overnight emails while the rest of the world still slept. She was the kind of woman who remembered every client's birthday, who baked homemade scones for office meetings, and who treated her employees like family. Her daughter Sarah lived across the country now, busy with her own family and health challenges, but Michael had stayed close. He lived nearby with his wife Jenna and their 2 children, and Linda had spent years grooming him to eventually take over the family business. But lately, something felt wrong. Linda couldn't quite put her finger on it, but there was a shadow creeping into her orderly world. The firm's profits were dipping despite a strong client base. Reports were being delayed, causing complaints from longtime customers who had never had reason to worry before. And Michael seemed different, somehow distant during their weekly family dinners, his eyes avoiding hers when she asked about the business. One crisp autumn morning, as leaves rustled outside her window like whispers of warning, Linda sat at her desk with the quarterly report spread before her. The numbers stared back at her, and something was very, very wrong. She adjusted her glasses and leaned closer, her heart beginning to quicken with that familiar thump of anxiety. Expenses for consulting services had ballooned to astronomical levels, thousands of dollars funneled to vendors she'd never heard of. Her coffee grew cold as she cross-checked the invoices against her memory of approved expenditures. A line item for tech upgrades showed $15,000 paid to a company called Apex Solutions. When she searched for them online, nothing came up. Another entry showed $8,000 for marketing consultation, but they hadn't run any marketing campaigns that quarter. "Who could do this?" she murmured to herself, her voice barely audible over the hum of the office printer in the next room. The evidence was mounting with each invoice she examined. These weren't mistakes or oversights. They were fake. Someone was embezzling from her company the legacy she'd poured her soul into building. Linda's mind raced through the possibilities, but there was really only one person who had access to create these kinds of transactions. Michael handled the finances now. He'd insisted she take a step back to enjoy her golden years, as he put it. But he was her son, blood of her blood. The thought that he could betray her this way twisted in her stomach like a knife. That evening, Linda drove home in her old sedan, the engine rumbling softly as she navigated the familiar winding roads. Her house was a modest two-story colonial, filled with memories, photos of Tom grinning from fishing trips, pictures of Sarah and Michael at various stages of their lives, awards from the local business association, and dozens of thank you cards from grateful clients over the years. The weekly family dinner that night felt different. As Michael carved the roast, the clink of silverware against plates seemed louder than usual. Jenna chattered about their upcoming vacation to Hawaii, an extravagant trip that seemed odd given the firm's recent struggles. When Michael's phone buzzed repeatedly, he excused himself to take a call in the hallway. Linda strained to hear, catching snippets of conversation that made her blood run cold. The transfer went through. Yeah, she'll never notice. We'll be set by Christmas. Her stomach nodded as the pieces fell into place. After they left, Linda poured herself a glass of wine and sat in her favorite armchair, the liquid sloshing gently as her hands trembled. She needed to talk to someone, but who? Sarah was too far away and dealing with her own health issues. She couldn't burden her daughter with this nightmare, especially not without concrete proof. Then Linda thought of Evelyn. Evelyn Morrison was her oldest friend, a woman of 70 with steel gray hair and eyes sharp as a hawk's paxix. They'd met in accounting school 40 years ago, bonding over late-night study sessions and shared dreams of building careers in a male-dominated field. Evelyn had become a forensic accountant, spending her career uncovering corporate fraud before retiring to garden and travel. If anyone could help Linda understand what was happening, it was Evelyn. The next morning, Linda met Evelyn at their favorite cafe. The aroma of fresh brewed coffee mingled with the scent of cinnamon rolls baking in the oven, but Linda could barely taste her usual order. She laid out the discrepancies she'd discovered, watching as Evelyn's expression grew increasingly grim. "This smells like embezzlement, Lynn," Evelyn said, her voice low and steady as she examined the papers. "Family or not, you need proof. Real proof that will hold up. Let me dig into the books with you." Linda hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee mug. "But, Michael, he's my son. What if I'm wrong?" Evelyn reached across the table and placed a weathered hand on Linda's and, "You're his mother. If it's not him, we'll clear it up and you'll have peace of mind." "If it Island?" She paused, her eyes filled with compassion. "Well, betrayal cuts deepest from those we love most. But you can't let sentiment destroy everything you've built." That afternoon, they spent hours in Linda's office after the regular staff had gone home. The only sounds were the click of keyboard keys and the occasional sigh from Linda as the evidence mounted. Evelyn's forensic training kicked in as she uncovered a sophisticated trail of deception. Shell companies linked to Michael's home address, wire transfers to offshore accounts, and a pattern of inflated expenses that had been going on for over a year. What they discovered was even worse than Linda had feared. Michael hadn't just been skimming a little here and there. He'd been systematically draining the company, using forged invoices and fake vendors to funnel money into accounts controlled by him and Jenna. The vacation to Hawaii wasn't just extravagant, it was being paid for with stolen money. So was their new luxury car, the expensive remodel of their house, and who knew what else. Tears welled in Linda's eyes as the scope of the betrayal became clear. How could he do this? After everything I've given him, everything I've taught him about integrity and hard work? Evelyn pulled her into a tight hug. "I don't know, honey, but we're going to fix this. You can't do it alone, though. Who else at the firm can we trust?" Linda thought immediately of Rosa Martinez. At 35, Rosa was one of the newer employees, having joined the firm just 6 months ago. She was a single mother who had escaped an abusive marriage, working tirelessly to build a better life for her young son. Rosa often stayed late to balance the books, double-checking her work with the kind of attention to detail that reminded Linda of herself at that age. More importantly, Rosa had demonstrated a quiet strength and unwavering honesty that Linda instinctively trusted. The next morning, Linda confided in Rosa, showing her the files in the locked conference room. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Rosa's warm brown eyes widened with shock and anger. "Mrs. Hargrove, this is serious. We should involve the authorities immediately." "Not yet," Linda said firmly, though her voice wavered slightly. "I need to confront him first. I need to understand why. But I can't do it without help. Will you stand by me?" Rosa nodded without hesitation. "You've been like a mentor to me. You gave me a chance when no one else would. Of course I'll help you." Together, the three women formed an unlikely but determined alliance. Linda, the steadfast matriarch fighting to save her life's work. Evelyn, the wise investigator with decades of experience exposing fraud. And Rosa, the fresh-eyed ally with both technical skills and fierce loyalty. Over the following weeks, they met in secret at Evelyn's cozy bungalow, a house filled with books and the comforting scent of herbal tea. Linda would arrive with homemade scones, flaky and buttery, a nervous habit that helped calm her nerves while they plotted their investigation. Evelyn contacted her old private investigator friend, who began discreetly tailing Michael. Rosa used her software knowledge to help recover deleted files from the company's backup servers, always with Linda's explicit permission. The pictures that came back from the private investigator painted a disturbing picture of Michael's secret life. Photos showed him at the downtown casino, chips clattering as he bet recklessly at the blackjack tables. Other images captured meetings with unsavory characters in dimly lit bars. Loan sharks, most likely, which explained the desperate nature of his thefts. Rosa's technical expertise proved invaluable as she recovered emails that Michael thought he'd permanently deleted. Messages to Jenna about the plan and how the old lady will never figure it out. Bank statements showing forged signatures, Linda's signature, copied well enough to fool a casual glance but clearly fake under close examination. The total amount embezzled was staggering. Over $250,000. Enough to bankrupt the firm if it continued, enough to destroy the legacy Linda had spent 3 decades building. Linda's nights became sleepless. She would lie in bed listening to the clock tick loudly in her bedroom, replaying memories of Michael as a boy, his first bike ride wobbling down the driveway while she ran alongside, his high school graduation, where he'd thanked her in his speech for always believing in him, the day he joined the firm, promising to carry on the family tradition with honor. The betrayal gnawed at her, but so did a growing determination. She wouldn't let him destroy what she'd built. More than that, she wouldn't let him continue down this path of lies and theft. If she truly loved her son, she had to stop him before he destroyed himself completely. With Evelyn's guidance, they gathered ironclad evidence, bank statements, recovered emails, surveillance photos, and a detailed audit trail showing exactly how the money had been stolen and where it had gone. They even discovered that Michael had opened a luxury condo in Jenna's name, a secret hideaway funded entirely with embezzled money. The confrontation was planned for a Friday evening in late October. Linda called Michael to the office under the pretense of a family meeting about the firm's future. A storm was brewing outside, thunder rumbling in the distance as rain began to patter against the windows like accusatory fingers. Evelyn and Rosa waited in the adjacent conference room, ready to step in when needed. Michael arrived at 7 o'clock, his coat dripping water onto the carpet. He seemed relaxed, unsuspecting, even smiling as he shook the rain from his hair. "Mom, what's this about? It's really coming down out there." "Sit down, Michael," Linda said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She slid a thick folder across the desk, papers rustling as they landed in front of him. "I think you know what this is about." His face went pale as he flipped through the evidence. Bank statements, forged invoices, photos of him at the casino, printouts of his deleted emails. His hands shook as he tried to process what he was seeing. This is a misunderstanding, Mom. I can explain. No, Linda interrupted, her eyes locking onto his. It's not a misunderstanding. It's theft. Embezzlement. From your own mother. From the family business that I built to provide for you and your sister. Michael's chair scraped back as he stood abruptly, panic replacing the false calm in his eyes. You don't understand the pressure I've been under, the debts. Jenna and I, we needed... Needed what? Linda's voice rose, echoing in the empty office. A condo? Vacations? Gambling money? While the firm that feeds your family crumbles around us? He lunged forward, reaching for the folder, but the door burst open, and Evelyn stepped in, her presence commanding despite her small stature. Don't even think about it, boy, Evelyn said sharply. We've got copies of everything, multiple copies, and the police on speed dial. Rosa followed behind her, holding up her phone. I've been recording this entire conversation, for the record. Michael's shoulders slumped as the fight drained out of him. He looked suddenly smaller, younger, like the boy who used to run to Linda for comfort when he scraped his knee. Mom, please, he said, his voice breaking. Don't do this. Think of the grandkids. Think of the family. I am thinking of them, Linda replied, her own voice cracking but remaining resolute. I'm thinking of the legacy you're trying to steal from them. I'm thinking of the employees who depend on this firm for their livelihoods. You're fired, Michael, effective immediately. And if you don't repay every single cent you've stolen, I'll press criminal charges. The storm outside intensified, lightning flashing like divine judgment through the office windows. Michael stood there for a long moment, rain lashing the glass behind him, before turning and walking toward the door. This isn't over, he said quietly, but there was no fight left in his voice. Yes, it is, Linda replied. It's been over since the day you decided to steal from your own family. The door slammed behind him with a resounding thud that seemed to shake the entire building. But Linda knew that confronting Michael was only the beginning. With Evelyn's law enforcement connections, she reported the embezzlement to the authorities the very next morning. Detective Maria Ortiz, a stern woman with decades of experience in white-collar crime, reviewed their meticulously prepared evidence file. This is a solid case, Mrs. Hargrove. Detective Ortiz said, her voice professional but not unkind. We'll move fast. Financial crimes like this, they tend to have a domino effect if we don't act quickly. The investigation moved with surprising speed. Within days, police had frozen the offshore accounts and secured a warrant for the luxury condo. Michael's gambling addiction came to light during questioning, along with the crushing debt to loan sharks that had driven him to increasingly desperate measures. Perhaps most damaging of all, Jenna turned on him completely when faced with potential prosecution as an accomplice. In exchange for leniency, she provided additional evidence of Michael's schemes, including recordings of conversations where he bragged about fooling the old lady. 2 weeks after their confrontation, Linda stood on her front porch watching as police led Michael away from his house in handcuffs. Neighbors peered through curtains and whispered behind hands as the local news van pulled up. The sight should have filled her with satisfaction, but instead she felt only a deep, aching sadness for the son she'd raised and the man he'd become. Evelyn appeared beside her, squeezing her arm gently. You did what you had to do, Lynn, what any responsible business owner would do. I know, Linda whispered, but that doesn't make it hurt any less. The legal proceedings dragged on for months, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Michael pleaded guilty to embezzlement, fraud, and tax evasion. He was sentenced to 5 years of probation, complete restitution of the stolen funds, and 1,000 hours of community service. The judge's words rang in Linda's ears. Mr. Hargrove, you violated the most sacred trust that between a mother and son. The court hopes this sentence will give you time to reflect on the magnitude of your betrayal. Meanwhile, Linda focused on rebuilding what Michael had nearly destroyed. She promoted Rosa to Chief Financial Officer, implementing new safeguards that required dual approval for all major expenses and quarterly audits by an independent firm. Rosa thrived in her new role, her confidence blooming as she took on greater responsibilities. "You've given me more than a job," Rosa told Linda one day over lunch. "You've given me a second chance at life." "No," Linda replied, smiling warmly. "You've earned every opportunity through your own hard work and integrity." Evelyn came out of retirement to work part-time as a fraud prevention consultant, her expertise helping other small businesses protect themselves from the kind of betrayal Linda had experienced. The three women formed an unshakable bond, their shared experience creating a friendship deeper than any they'd known before. The firm not only recovered but began to thrive in ways Linda had never imagined. Word spread about her courage in exposing the embezzlement, and new clients came seeking an accounting firm with demonstrated integrity. Within 6 months, profits were up 20%, and Linda found herself hiring additional staff to handle the increased workload. She even started a mentorship program for women in business, sharing her story at community events and chambers of commerce meetings. Standing behind podiums with microphones humming, she would tell audiences about the importance of trust, vigilance, and the courage to do what's right even when it breaks your heart. The restitution payments came slowly but steadily. Michael sold assets, worked multiple jobs, and gradually began paying back what he'd stolen. It would take years to repay everything, but Linda saw it as a path toward eventual redemption, not just financially, but personally. One spring evening, as birds chirped in her blooming garden and the scent of roses filled the warm air, Linda hosted a family barbecue. Sarah flew in from across the country with her children, their laughter filling the yard as they played games and splashed in the small pool. Even Michael attended. Though he came alone, Jenna had divorced him and moved away with their children, taking half of what little remained of their assets. The gathering wasn't perfect. There were awkward silences and careful conversations that danced around the elephant in the room, but it was progress. Michael was in therapy for his gambling addiction, working honest jobs, and slowly beginning to understand the magnitude of what he'd done. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said quietly as they stood together by the grill, watching the grandchildren play. "I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I understand now. I understand what I threw away." Linda looked at her son, really looked at him. He'd lost weight, aged years in months, but there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Humility, perhaps, or genuine remorse. "I know you are," she said softly, "and I forgive you, Michael. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean going back to the way things were." He nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "I know. I just hope, someday, maybe I can earn back a little bit of your trust." "We'll see," Linda replied, "one day at a time." As the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Linda stood in her garden surrounded by the people she loved most. Sarah approached with a glass of wine, slipping her arm around her mother's shoulders. "I'm proud of you, Mom," Sarah said quietly. "You turned the tables on him. You didn't let him destroy what you built." Linda smiled, feeling a weight she'd carried for months finally beginning to lift. "I had help, good friends who stood by me when it mattered most." "That's what family is supposed to do," Sarah replied. "Real family, the kind you choose." Looking around at Evelyn chatting with Rosa near the flower beds, at her grandchildren playing innocently in the fading light, at Michael working quietly to earn his way back into their lives, Linda felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time: peace. Justice, she realized, wasn't just about punishment or revenge. It was about protecting what mattered, standing up for what was right, and having the courage to make difficult choices even when they broke your heart. It was about turning the tables on betrayal and emerging stronger on the other side. The firm continued to grow, becoming a cornerstone of the business community. Linda's story became local legend the grandmother, who refused to let family loyalty blind her to criminal behavior, who chose justice over sentiment and emerged victorious. Young women starting their own businesses would seek her out for advice, drawn by her reputation for integrity and strength. And in the quiet suburb of Willow Creek, where maple trees stood like silent guardians over neat houses and well-tended gardens, Linda Hargrove's legacy lived on. Not just in the successful business she'd built, but in the lives she'd touched, the principles she'd upheld, and the courage she'd shown when faced with the ultimate test of character. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also revealed strengths she didn't know she possessed. With the help of true friends who became family, she had turned the tables on deception and built something even stronger from the ashes of her broken trust. In the end, that was the real victory. Not the money recovered or the criminal prosecuted, but the knowledge that when everything she'd worked for was threatened, Linda Hargrove had found the courage to fight back. And she had won. Thank you for listening until the end. If you enjoyed the story, please consider leaving us a like. This helps us reach more people.